One of the worst things about the disappointing end to Tennessee's season is how much it takes away from a great season defensively and a dominant defensive performance in the playoffs. Heading into week one, Shane Bowen probably had as low of an approval rating from fans as any coordinator in the league, but he ended up leading a drastic turnaround for Tennessee's defense. I went through every statistical category that was available, and I couldn't find a single one where the Titans regressed, and in most areas they improved dramatically. So in this video, I want to discuss what exactly the Titans' defensive scheme is, where they struggled, where they succeeded, and what caused such a significant improvement from 2020 to 2021. For the most part, I'm going to focus on Shane Bowen as opposed to individual players because a lot of those guys will get separate videos themselves, but obviously the improved personnel was a major factor. Mike Vrabel's defensive philosophy has been difficult to pin down up to this point because if we rewind back to his first NFL job, he was the linebackers coach in Houston under Romeo Crennel, who ran the 2-gap, 3-4, and played a lot of cover 2, and he kept that scheme going when he became the Texans DC in 2017. Then in 2018, he came to Tennessee and pretty much gave Dean Pease control of the defense. They ran the Baltimore Cover 1 system. And then last season, the Titans were kind of all over the place, and it didn't really seem like they knew what they wanted to do. But this season, it became clear that Vrabel and Bowen's defensive identity is actually not having one. If we look at the breakdown of their coverage usage from this season, you can see that they kind of ran a little bit of everything. They were the only NFL team this year to not rank inside the top 10 for any coverage, and it wasn't because of indecisiveness or not being able to find something that worked. They were making a conscious effort to be as diverse and amorphous as possible so that offenses didn't know exactly what to expect from play to play or game to game. I discussed this in detail in my breakdown of the Chiefs game, but the Titans used a ton of post-snap safety rotation to disguise their coverages and slow down the quarterback's processing. The most common example of this would be lining up with 2 deep safeties and playing cover 3 buzz with the strong safety coming down into the hook curl. This year, the average NFL defense rotated their safeties post-snap on 23% of passing plays, but the Titans did this 38% of the time, and their defense was significantly better when they did this. When they disguised their coverage, they ranked first in EPA per play, second in yards per play, and third in success rate, but they were near the bottom of the league in those categories with static safety alignment. Being able to add that sort of cloud of uncertainty about what you're doing is great. I think every coach would agree with that. But if you're going to be moving people around the defensive backfield a lot, you're going to have to line up with 2 deep safeties pretty frequently. Rotating from 2 high to 1 high is way easier than the other way around because it's just so much easier for a safety to play downhill than it is to play uphill where you're starting out in the box and then you've got to recover depth. You're just a lot more vulnerable in those situations. And so this season, the Titans had 2 deep safeties before the snap on 63% of defensive plays, which was the 5th most in the NFL, and they pretty much played the Brandon Staley defense, where we're going to line up split safety, give you a light box to try to get you to run the ball, and then from that alignment, we can shift our coverage post-snap into whatever we want. A lot of people think that Staley and Fangio and all those guys only run quarters, but those teams are always near the top of the league in cover 3. The point is that you're kind of immunizing yourself from play action because if you're a safety and you bite on the play fake, but you were lined up deep to start out, you're just going to take 1 step back and you're in good position. There's really 2 main ways you can rotate from 2 high to single high. You can run cover 3 and roll the safety down to the flat or the hook, or you can run cover 1 cross where you've got man coverage across the board, 1 deep safety, and the other safety defending crossing routes over the middle. This is really effective against 3-by-1 formations where a lot of teams will target the tight end or slot receiver on deep crossers. Having a safety bracketing the inside of that route allows the slot corner to play with outside leverage and be aggressive at the line of scrimmage. Rotating from 2 high to single high is less common because, like I said, it puts your deep defenders in more compromising situations. The main way Tennessee would do this is by playing 2 invert, where the deep safeties and cornerbacks essentially switch responsibilities. Overall, the Titans had very few busted coverages, especially compared to last season, but when they ran 2 invert, they had a ton of missed assignments. On this 3rd and 12 against Buffalo, the deep safeties are coming down to the flats and the corners are dropping into the deep halves, but against a vertical switch release, Elijah Molder needs to carry Cole Beasley's route down the field. Even though the Titans weren't very successful running 2 invert, you can see the merits of the coverage on this play against the Colts. Tennessee's in single high, but Chris Jackson is going to drop back from the slot into the deep half, and Indianapolis is running a play called Buffalo 7, with in-breaking routes from the 1 and 2, and the number 3 receiver running a vertical option route. Against single high, he'll run down the seam, and against split safety, he'll run a deep corner. So by disguising this coverage, the Titans get the Colts into a cover 3 beater when they're actually in cover 2. But even on this play, which was successful, you can see how Chris Jackson was kind of behind the 8-ball from the jump. He wasn't able to stay in control, and he ended up committing what probably should have been pass interference. Tennessee also ran a good amount of Tampa 2, especially on 3rd down, and they had a lot more success in that coverage, although they pretty much only like David Long playing over the deep middle. You can tell when he was injured, they ran Tampa 2 a lot less frequently because Rashaan Evans just doesn't have as much range when tight ends get vertical. Those are the most notable non-vanilla coverages the Titans ran, but they were really kind of a grab bag of different stuff. They played quarters a lot, they ran a good amount of Nick Saban cover 7 stuff, and they were really good, I thought, at breaking tendencies and preventing offenses from getting comfortable. They would go like 4 weeks without playing 2-man and then run it 6 times in one game. So big fan of the Titans coverage usage this season. The Titans blitzed at the 2nd lowest rate in the NFL, but that doesn't mean they weren't doing anything to scheme up pressure. They ran the 2nd most simulated pressures in the league, and a sim pressure is a 4-man rush where you're rushing a linebacker or defensive back and dropping someone from the front 4 into coverage. This is one reason I push back on a lot of people's criticisms when they see Harold Landry or Bud Dupree back in coverage like once per game, because even though those guys aren't great cover players, that's kind of what you have to do to disguise your pressures. When Tennessee would blitz, it was primarily cover 3 fire zones, but they did run some fire zones with cover 2 later in the season. I really liked this delayed safety blitz versus New England. They run what looks like a standard sim pressure with Molden looping around and Derek Roberson dropping into coverage. New England thinks they've got it blocked up, and this A-gap widens out for Kevin Byard to come through and get the sack. The Titans also used a ton of stunts and twists, and I have a video breaking down all of the different games they run up front, but I'll discuss the 2 that are most unique to Vrabel and Bowen. Flush accounted for 15% of the stunts Tennessee used this season, and it resulted in 6 sacks. The Titans primarily ran this out of an overload front with a nose tackle, 3-tech, and edge rusher all to the same side, and the 1-tech and 3-tech penetrate one gap outside, and the 5-tech or wide 9 loops inside. The other stunt I want to discuss is the pirate stunt, which is kind of the inverse of the flush, because here the nose tackle is the looper and the 2 guys on the outside are the penetrators. Overall, Tennessee used stunts and twists on 24% of their pass rush snaps, and it resulted in 18 sacks, so it was definitely an important element of their ability to pressure the quarterback. We discussed earlier how often Tennessee lined up with 2 deep safeties, and you would think that they would struggle defending the run because of that, but the Titans' run defense from split safety pre-snap was better than most defenses in all situations. This is where they would have ranked out of all rushing defenses from any alignment, and the biggest reason they were so good was that Amani Hooker and Kevin Byard were so reliable defending the run. Tennessee was comfortable having either of those guys in the run fit with 5 to 7 yards of extra depth because they were consistently able to come up and make plays. So even if you're playing with a lighter box and you're out-gapped up front, you're giving up 8 yards instead of 50. We can also look at how Tennessee's run defense performed by box count, and you can see that the Titans were actually better defending the run out of light boxes. The final thing I want to discuss is the impact of Jim Schwartz, because a lot of people have given Jim Schwartz the credit for turning the Titans defense around, and there's nothing on film that indicates that, to me at least. People have mentioned the wide alignment Tennessee's edge rushers play with sometimes, but they lined up like that last year. So if anyone can point to something specific that Jim Schwartz has implemented to improve the defense, I'm all ears, but until there's anything concrete, I'm going to credit Shane Bowen, Mike Vrabel, and improved personnel. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to subscribe. Also follow me on Twitter and check out my Patreon if you want access to extra content.